Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to r/IDontWorkHereLady, where Karens seem to think that everyone is meant to serve them and nobody else matters. And in today's episode, Karens are at it again, guys, throwing tantrums and forcing customers to obey them. I hope you enjoy the stories. Hit subscribe if you're not subscribed, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So a little over a decade ago, I worked for the local hardware store in my small town. Unfortunately, the assistant manager who I reported to, Colin, was a D-bag. The guy hated me because people would joke that I was way more qualified than he was, although I had absolutely no interest in climbing the corporate ladder or taking his job. Now, the job itself was overtasked and understaffed, and things were only getting busier as there was a building boom happening in the area at the time. As a result, I quickly end up overworked every day, trying to keep up with the constant influx of goods and outgoing orders. To make matters worse, the overall manager, John, decides to reassign the two people who were helping me to a different department, leaving me on my own. When I protested, I was told to solve my own problems. I somehow kept up with the workload though, but knowing that this wasn't going to work in the long run, I continued in my attempts to get more help in my area. Even just one extra person would have made a huge difference. I tried reasoning with the manager John, saying, "What if I get sick or injured? How will you get the orders done then?" His solution is that he would have some of the casual staff from the front retail area fill in if that happened. Once again, I was told to solve my own problems. And I thought, fine, I'll do just that. The situation continued becoming more difficult each week. The incoming goods were increasing in volume to keep up with demand, and as outgoing orders were to take priority, the incoming goods began piling up. This is when Colin decides to rear his ugly head and make a fuss about stock not being checked in and stored on time. And in one of our more robust discussions, I seriously considered rearranging his face, and I told him so. He decided to go on an early lunch and hid from me in his office for the rest of the week. That was the day I realized I need to get out of this place. As for solving my own problems, I was looking for a new job. I answered an ad for correctional officers and did the interviews and was finally accepted for the training to begin in 1 month. Perfect timing. The next Monday, I walk into John's office and I gave my 2 weeks notice. John was absolutely appalled that I would consider leaving such a good job. He tried offering me a raise of $1,000 a year, and I laughed and said my starting pay was $15,000 more than I was getting here, and walked out. Now, you would think that a smart manager would immediately take steps to cover my position and begin training a replacement, but no, nothing happened for almost 2 weeks. And on my last day, John finally shows up with a replacement, some entirely forgettable teenager who had no chance of keeping up. I trained him the best I could in like 3 hours and then said my goodbyes. Well, 2 months later, I walked in as a customer, flush with my new job money. The place was an utter mess. There was stuff everywhere, unprocessed goods still in sealed boxes, pallets of sheeting just dumped in the truck yard, and no one could find anything. The original guy I trained was nowhere to be seen, and 4 new young guys with haunted-looking faces were madly scrambling about, trying to sort their stuff out. Nobody knew where anything was, where anything goes, or even how to do a basic invoice check. It was total disaster, which did bring a warm glow to my evil black told you so heart. Upon seeing me, my manager John quickly rushes up to me, and the guy pulls me aside and begs me to help out, to show the new guys what to do because they were super behind. I took great pleasure in reminding him that I had repeatedly warned him this could happen. And also, not only did I not work here, but he'll have to, and I quote, "solve your own problems." He just shook his head and walked away. Oh boy, I just love how John's "solve your own problems" line came back to bite him in the end. And in my opinion, John for sure needs to get fired because it doesn't seem like he's good at his job. Like the guy had ample time to get a new guy in for OP to train before they left, but no, they brought in some new dude on OP's last day of being there and expects the guy to know everything. And this is what they get in the end. And for all of you who are curious about the hardware store, OP said they were bought out not too long after by a bigger hardware chain that ends up replacing all management. So in college, I was a tour guide for prospective students. You know, walking backwards and telling scripted puns. Technically, I was employed by the admissions office to do this, but in no capacity was I involved in admission decisions whatsoever. No one asked me which kids asked a smart question or who texted through the whole tour or anything like that. I simply just took people on tour of the college campus. My entire description was to show up, walk the families around the campus, answer questions about student life, all that stuff. And for context, I'd give like 3 to 6 tours a week to groups of 40 plus people. So with that said, I was at the large chain store with my mom one day, and we were shopping for groceries. I had left my mom waiting in the deli department to grab a couple of things when I see this woman glaring at me. Now, I didn't think much of it at the time because I didn't know her, but as I progressed down the aisles, I realized she was following me. The woman had a daughter about my age and they were whispering, and all I was able to catch was the woman telling her daughter, "No, that's definitely her." The woman then approaches me and says, "Are you so-and-so who toured us around the college?" I say, "Yes." And that's when she replies, "I bet you think you're hot stuff, huh?" At that, I let out a nervous chuckle and say, "Oh, what?" The woman goes on and says, "My daughter had a rock-solid application, and her alumni interviewer said that her chances were very good. 2 days after our visit to the college campus, when you took us on tour, she's rejected. You're the only one affiliated with the university we spoke to that whole time. So tell me, what did you not like about my daughter?" The daughter chimes in at this point and says, "Yeah, you need to tell me." I reply, "I'm sorry to hear she wasn't accepted, but I have nothing to do with admission decisions. I just give tours around college campus." This is when Karen says, "I'm not an idiot. I know they tell you to say that. So what did you say about my daughter? Did you not like that she's prettier than you? That she dresses well? What was the reason you turned down my daughter? I want to know what you said." I just respond, "No, seriously, I'm a sophomore there myself. You can call and ask. I do not get any input into admissions." Karen says, "But you work for the admissions department." I just tell her, "Okay, technically they hired me, but there's janitors who work for the admission department and they don't get to decide who gets into college. I'm so sorry that your daughter..." The woman interrupts me and says, "Quit lying. My daughter had near perfect ACT scores. I bet she had better scores than you." At this point, I can see my mom found me, and I think my mom thought that I was catching up with people I knew since there was a girl my age, but she starts to realize there's something wrong at this point. The daughter says, "Just tell me why you didn't let me in. You can tell me, it's the past now. Tell me." All I say is, "I really don't know. I have nothing to do with it, I swear." You can actually call and ask, and they will tell you that tour guides do not get to decide that stuff. Karen says, "You bet we'll be calling and filing a complaint." At this point, my mom says, "Excuse me, what's happening here? Who are you?" Karen asked, "Who are you?" My mom just laughs and says, "What are you guys talking about?" And the daughter says, "Is it because I'm white? I'm a person of color." At this point, I just say, "Mom, let's go, let's check out." Karen says, "Not admitting my daughter was the biggest mistake of your career. I'll have you know that I'm a millionaire and I would have made big donations to the school. When your boss hears from me, you're gonna be fired." Now, I wasn't even upset at that because it was so absurd what this woman was saying. My mom leads me away and she looks at me still very confused as to what's going on. We bought our items and I was pretty rattled as I got in the car. But as I was explaining to my mom, the absurdity of the whole situation finally hit me, and I just start laughing. I stumbled on these stories recently and I thought people would enjoy my story. I hope you do. And what an encounter that was. And listen, like, if you're dumb enough to think that a college tour guide has any sort of power when it comes to making the final call on college admissions, it's not surprising why you weren't accepted. Like, the real reason was probably Karen mom spamming the admissions department, constantly asking why her daughter hasn't seen an acceptance letter yet. And the millionaire thing, guys, like, I don't want to say I doubt it, but when people are angry and they say I'm a millionaire, I can blah 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 blah, chances are they aren't. Like, if you're so rich, Karen, buy your daughter's admission. Easy peasy. So I work for a rental car company in a very small airport, like literally. The airport consists of one room, with TSA working as a partition between the entrance to the airport and the gate to board the plane. The front desk of the rental car company is rather large, with the company name on it. It's also the first thing travelers see when they enter the airport, whether it's coming off the plane or coming in to board the plane. So I'm used to people coming in and thinking that we're an all-known information booth for the airport, regardless of the yellow wall behind me or the big letters on the desk. Typically, the information that people are looking for is easy enough for me to answer. Stuff like, when does Alaska Airlines open? What do I do about parking? Where's TSA? Etc. All the questions are a bit annoying since the airport's only one room, and all it would take is for somebody to walk 5 steps in any direction to get to the right location. But it is what it is. Also, it's worth mentioning this. FAA regulation is that airlines have to close down 40 minutes prior to departure. After that time, you can't check in for your flight and you can't get a boarding pass. And that's on all systems. You can't check in on your phone or electronic kiosks with less than 40 minutes before departure. And just to be clear, this is done for Homeland Security reasons, and it's not due to staffing issues. Once the 40-minute mark passes, all staff and the passengers have to go to the secure side of the airport, and they can't come back until after the flight takes off. With all that being said, let's move on to the actual I don't work here lady moment. So a customer approaches me at my desk to pick up his rental car. I go through all the paperwork and send him on his way. The guy comes back a few days later to return the car and to catch his flight. It's pretty standard with our customers that they're usually pretty avid travelers and have their travel plans perfected to a T. So the guy hands me the keys to the rental and I let him know that Alaska Airlines closes soon, and if he needs to get a boarding pass or check a bag, to do it soon. The guy grunts and carries on his way. I've done my part, so I'm getting ready for the customers that are coming in on the next flight. I then hear an Alaska agent make their stereotypical 5 minutes until the desk closes announcement. I just keep doing my thing. Now, there's usually 3 people working my booth, but due to some complex staffing issues that day, I was the only one working. Additionally, it was one of our more high-volume days, so I was alone, doing a 3-person job by myself and attempting to get all the cars I needed ready. As I finished getting the last car ready that I needed, I come in from the parking lot to see that one customer guy just standing at my desk. The guy's talking on his phone, making it difficult to talk to him and find out what he needs. The guy's obviously upset that I wasn't at the desk constantly. The entire exchange goes like this. The customer says into his phone, "Yeah, I can't find anyone that effing works here. They're all useless." This is when I approach and he puts the itinerary down on the desk in front of me, and he shouts, "Check me in." I tell him, "I'm sorry, sir, I do not work for the airlines, I just do the rental cars." The customer then says into his phone, "Okay, hold on a sec, she's being dumb." The guy then says to me, "What do you mean you can't check me in? You work for the airport, don't you?" I tell him, "Yes, I work in the airport, but I don't work for the airlines. If you need a boarding pass, you need to talk to the airlines." The guy says, "There's no one there." I tell him, "Yes, so they have to close 40 minutes prior to departure, per FAA regulations. You're gonna have to wait till they come back after the next flight takes off." At this point, the inbound flight has landed, and my customers are lining up behind the man at the counter. But the man wasn't willing to accept my information. The guy shouts and says, "But I'm supposed to be on that plane." I respond, "Yes, so unfortunately without a boarding pass, there is nothing anyone else can do. You'll have to wait for an agent to come back and get you rescheduled on the next flight out." The guy goes back to talking to somebody on the phone that's been pressed to his ear the entire time, telling them that he'll call back. He hangs up the phone and says to me, "Well, you need to go to the back and get someone for me, I'll wait." I respond, "I'm sorry, sir, my booth is completely separate from the airlines. There's no way for me to grab somebody from the back." The guy then says to me, "It seems nobody here can do their jobs. If you can't get anyone, then how am I supposed to make my flight?" I let him know, "Unfortunately, you've missed it. You'll need to wait for an Alaska agent to come back and reschedule, or you can call the 800 number on their podium." Hearing me say that, the customer loses it. He screams, "This is just ridiculous. Give me my effing car back right now. I'll drive to the other effing airport myself." I tell him, unfortunately, I can't do that either. All of the rental cars are booked. I go on to explain how I have to honor my reservations in the order they've come in, so everyone piled up behind him in line needs to get their cars first. However, if he was willing to wait an hour, I could take care of all the customers in line and then go out and clean the car to get him to his destination. He didn't like that idea either, something about how he would miss his connecting flight if he waits an hour. But the drive to his next destination would take 3 hours anyways, so he was gonna miss that connecting flight regardless. He then says to me, "You have 2 effing options. You are either checking me in for this flight right now, or I will have you fired." We go back and forth for another 5 minutes, how I can't do anything for him, and the guy wasn't going to leave until I did something. At this point, the customers behind him start getting irritable. It's 7 o'clock at night, and they just want to get their rental cars and go to the hotels. At this point, the guy holds out his phone at me and says, "Then you, useless bitch, need to explain to my boss how you refuse to let me on this flight." I tell him, "I'm not refusing to let you on. I don't work for the airlines. I deal with rental cars, sir." The guy's adamant though that I take his phone and tell his boss. So the guy dials and I take the phone and explain the situation to his boss. I tell his boss, "Unfortunately, your employee who has been nothing but rude to me missed their flight. It didn't matter that I told him to check in, that the airlines made announcements, or that any other airport would have had the same problem. He was more concerned with his phone than with his travel plans, and he's been nothing but unprofessional." I then hang up the phone, passed it back to him, and ushered him out of the way towards the direction of the airline's desk, where he spent the next 30 minutes crying and blubbering to try and get on the flight that had already taken off. And the next flight wasn't until 5 a.m. the next day. Thankfully, the rest of the people in line were abnormally nice to me. I think they must have heard how rude the man was being. Yeah, the only thing that would have made this so much better, guys, is if the dude got fired when he got back. Like, giving the phone to OP wasn't a good idea, and I'm glad she let the boss know what an idiot they have working there. Like, how dense and entitled do you have to be to think the rental car agency is also the airline? With that said, kudos to OP for staying patient though, because a lot of people would have lost their minds at that guy. So this one happened back in 1997, when I was interviewing for my first job at a restaurant by my house. So there's me, a scrawny 14-year-old, trying to get my first real job. The people involved in this mess was the owner, a woman who was the sweetest lady you'll ever meet, and Sam, the supervisor on shift. There was a few other staff members too, but they don't feature much. The interview had gone pretty well, and a common thing to do back then was to have a potential hire tail an actual employee, who happened to be my friend. We just finished up doing that, and I'd been told I'd most likely had the job. I was ecstatic, my first job. So I was on my way out, and I was chatting to my employee friend who was on break, telling him that I can't wait to be working together. When all of a sudden, a huge man grabs my shoulder and he starts screaming at me. All I heard was something chicken disgusting. Me, stunned from being manhandled, didn't really catch what he was saying, so I stayed quiet, and he says, "Well, are you gonna give me some new chicken or what?" This is when my employee friend says, "Excuse me, sir, actually, this person is..." The guy interrupts him and says, "Quiet, I'm talking to this guy." My friend tries to tell him once more and says, "But sir, he's not an..." But he gets interrupted by the guy screaming, saying, "I said I'm not talking to you." The man turns to glare at me and says, "Well?" I'm still stuttering at this point, and I say, perhaps you should..." He then says, "I want some free chicken. This crap is undercooked and tasted crap. You need to replace it." It's now that I notice the guy's waving around a half-eaten drumstick and gesturing to a table occupied by a younger version of him. There was also what looked like the remains of a family feast. I also became aware of the disgusting grease stain on my shoulder from where he grabbed me. I responded, "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't actually work here. I could grab the manager for you." I can see the man getting angrier, and he says, "The F you don't. I saw you back there. You came out of the kitchen. You need to go back there and get me a new order right now." By now, I've recovered from the shock a little, and I'm getting pissed off at this guy, as well as a bit scared and out of my depth. Not wanting to hurt the prospect of working in this fine establishment, I try to de-escalate the situation. I tell the guy, well, I can try and help. I'll just go back to the kitchen and see if... The guy interrupting again, yelling louder this time, says, yeah, you'd better get the effing boss. Now, the guy's yelling had got the attention of everyone in the restaurant, and it turns out that Sam was out back and he had only just heard the guy. The restaurant owner was in the office, however, and she had pretty much heard it from the start. Enter her stage left. She comes out and says, excuse me, why are you yelling? The guy says to her, no one asked you, I want to speak to the boss. The owner tells him, sir, I'm the boss. To which he responds, a bitch is the boss of this place? Your staff are useless, and this meal, how do you manage to mess up chicken this badly? The guy says that while waving his drumstick in the air. This is when the owner tells him, listen to me, how dare you come into my restaurant, insult my staff, abuse a member of the public that's not employed here, and then to top it off, calling me names. I've had enough of you. You're not getting free food off of us because you finished the meal you complained about. So it can't have been that bad. You are trying to get free stuff. She then turns to me and reduces the volume to conversational. And she says to me, I'd like to formally offer you this position. If you choose to accept, your first task as an employee is to help Sam here escort this loudmouth prick off the premises. Unless he'd like me to call the police so they can view the security footage. The guy, turning an interesting shade of white, says, no, that won't be necessary, I'll go. We discussed it later, and we thought that that guy might have been a person of interest to the police, because as soon as they were mentioned, he did a complete 180 and almost ran out of the store with his son. So there's the story of how an angry customer secured me my first job back in 1997. First off, I absolutely love it when a boss defends their employees against rude customers instead of giving in. Second, guys, I'm always baffled at people who freak out at food establishments. Like, we've all seen those videos, right? Like, relax, sir, it's frickin' chicken. There's no need to lose your temper over a drumstick, okay? But like the owner said, I think maybe some people do it for compensation, not knowing it makes them look really bad. And also, I don't think the guy might have been an interest to police. He probably still had some sense to not get arrested in front of his kid. Well, it finally happened. I got Karen'd yesterday. So here's some background. I'm a 6'3", bearded fat man with a private security background. I'm also currently an operations manager for a state facility that provides temporary housing for kids and teens who are waiting for a foster home. A few days ago, my other manager and I received bonuses. Since I'm not really in need of a bonus, I offered to help my team out by doing something for them. One of the main things that everybody wanted was more caffeine, since we all chugged that stuff like water throughout our shifts. Since everything was quiet at work, I decided to slip out to Wally World so I could get caffeine to stock the staff fridge and acquire a working coffee machine. Cue me standing in the appliance section, looking at coffee machines and debating getting a single or multi-cup machine. It was during this time that the woman who I'll call Karen struck. Out of nowhere, I hear the shrill, piercing voice from this woman, who looks to be in her mid-50s, and she looked like she walked straight out of the woods and into the Walmart. She says to me, I need you to come with me right now. Of course, I ignore it, and I continue looking for the coffee machine. The next thing I hear is, excuse me, don't make me say it again. You need to come with me right now. At this very moment, I did a quick look around to see if there was a kid or employee around, because she surely wasn't talking to the guy who's wearing gray cargo pants and an olive button-up t-shirt at Wally World. But there wasn't anyone else around. So I ask, do you mean me? She then shouts, yes, I mean you. Are all managers this dumb? I reply to her, ma'am, I do not work here. And she yells back, yes you do. Is that radio of yours broken? Did you not hear them calling for a manager? At this point, I realized I still had my radio on from work. So I respond, oh, no ma'am, I didn't, but that's because... And this is when she cuts me off and says, they give you a radio, so use it. Come with me. They're refusing to give me a refund. I had to look all over for you. I was just staring blankly at her, and I say, no ma'am, I'm not coming with you. I don't work here. And she responds, "How dare you refuse to help me? You won't help a God-fearing person who's being taken advantage of?" And hearing her say that, I finally lost it. I say, "Look, lady, keep your mouth shut and listen. I do not work here. Do you see what I'm wearing? I'm not dressed like an employee." Karen tried to cut me off, but I knife-hand her while saying, "Lady, did it ever cross your mind that maybe it's from my actual job? I don't work here, and I don't want to hear another word. If I see you in this aisle by the time I finish grabbing that box, I'm going to make the rest of your time in this store a living hell." At that, she just scuttles away, and I finish my shopping. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /IDontWorkHereLady. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's in our /entitledpeople episode, where Karens are trespassing and having parties on other people's property. It's such a wild episode, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.